How's it going, everybody? And welcome to episode 328 of Master My Garden podcast. Now, this week's episode being the first Friday of the month, we're going to look at what to sow for the month ahead. So, what to sow in the month of May. And yeah, this is probably the busiest month for sowing. But before we get into that, special mention for this week's sponsor, it's Probio Carbon. And for any of you that has been listening to the podcast for a while, you know that I have used over the last number of years Probio Carbon's biochar. And it's biochar, of which you guys know all the benefits of, but it's inoculated with Bacillus subtilis. And it really increases plant health. It encourages vigorous growth, better yields. And I suppose one of the biggest things with it, it's a one-time application. So if you guys apply it to your garden, then you're essentially creating the biochar creates little pockets in which the microbes will live. So it creates like a little pocket for soil health, for microbes and so on. So a really brilliant thing to add to your garden. Probio Carbon, they also sell some brilliant products like Cran, which we'll be talking about in the weeks coming up, which is uh, a bacterial mix which is designed to invigorate plants, stimulate their natural defenses, and very good for things like Buxus blight. But we'll be talking about that in a couple of weeks. I'll put a link to Probio Carbon in the show notes, and yeah, some superb products backed up by the brilliant knowledge of Dr. Karen O'Hanlon. So really good range, and delighted to have them on as a sponsor. So what to sow in the month of May? It's as I say, the busiest month from when it comes to sowing, and every year and every month, the list changes and evolves. And this year I would say it has been a really tricky year, as you know, from the point of view of the wet. But another feature is that we're getting huge fluctuations in temperature. And a good example of that this week, again, I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago where I had up to 30 degrees in the propagation area of the polytunnel, and then it dropped down overnight to minus or to zero point 0.5 degrees. And we have had the exact same thing this week. So I had some daytime temperatures because we've had some beautiful blue skies and sunny days this week. But I also had nighttime temperatures down to zero. And even within the days, I don't know if anyone else is finding this or any of you guys are noticing this, but even within a day, we seem to get kind of big variances. Today was a good example of that. This morning, bright, sunny, quite warm, quite mild. And then sometime in the middle of the day, there was a really cold chill in the air. And then in the afternoon, it darkened down, got mild again. And at this point in time, there's a little bit of rain. But it fluctuates, very much so within the day. And I don't just mean it's warm when you're standing in the sun and it's cold when you're in the shade, because that's a kind of a normal feature in the spring. I'm talking about shifts in the air mass and the temperatures of the air mass. To me, that's something that has been quite noticeable this spring. And, certainly that plays a big impact in terms of sowing seeds and how they germinate, how they grow on, and so on. That fluctuating temperature, as I said, is not ideal for seedlings. Ground temperatures as well, they would have been rising quite steadily over the last week, but again, a little bit of rain now and a cooler day, and they kind of have dropped down again. And we can get sowing now outside, but we're really only at the start of it, which seems really strange considering we're entering into the month of May. Um, because typically we would, certainly last year we would have got out and got sowing a little bit earlier. But yeah, it just goes to show every year, every month, different, not necessarily challenges, but just every year is different. And you have to learn to, I suppose, navigate that, because I don't want to be talking about the weather constantly, but when it comes to sowing seeds and planting out seedlings, it is a huge factor in, your decision process and so on. So yeah, you can't ignore it for sure. And hopefully, now that we enter May, that we are getting into a period of steady, warm, sunny days. That's what you'd like. So yeah, that's where it's at. But when it comes to sowing seed, this is the busiest month. and the list is quite big this month. The thing about it is everything that's on this list, and I kind of highlight some of these as we go through. There's certain crops that I will only sow once a year, and that's it. One sowing is loads, of certain things. So everything is on the list. The list is probably at its biggest this month, but you don't have to sow everything on it. It just means that you could if you wanted to or you needed to. So looking at the list, we're starting at the top again. The other thing that changes this month a little bit is our variety choices and possibly, our windows for harvest. So, for example, the first one on the list is cabbage, and we'll still sow the likes of our York or our Greyhound or a pointed head cabbage because they'll give you quite quick crops over the next couple of months. But what we will do, certainly late in the month, is that we'll switch to, our winter focus. And this is a really important feature of sowing seed is that sometimes with your salads, we'll talk about it, you're successionally sowing, you're sowing regularly in order to ensure that we, constantly have something coming on the horizon, that we have our next replacement of our spinach or whatever. But for the likes of a cabbage, sometimes you have to look long into the distance. And by doing that, you sort of fill those gaps at the back end of the year. And this is, that's a really important thing. So we're looking ahead to things like, at the end of the month, sowing our winter winter crops like our winter cabbage, starting to sow the likes of savoy cabbage, red cabbage, Brussels sprouts, things like that. And that's at the very end of the month. So you're looking ahead here. Things like leeks as well. We're sowing, for that autumn winter period. So you're sowing for the now when it comes to salads, and you're sowing for the future harvest when it comes to some of these other crops. So yeah, first on the list is cabbage, and again, as I say, you can do the pointed cabbage or the York style cabbage, and then later in the month we're going to switch to our winter crops. Calabrese or broccoli is the same. So we're looking at summer, autumn varieties and even winter varieties from now on. So we're switching, moving from really early maturing ones to sort of later, mid and late season maturing ones. So Calabrese is a very good one. Purple sprout and broccoli, kind of last sowing of that. Leeks, we're looking for winter harvesting ones now, so we're looking ahead here. So leeks you can sow this month, and that's kind of again, leeks will be the last sowing that we do this month. One that I don't have much success with it when I sow it, don't sow it very often. I've probably sowed it twice and it hasn't been very successful. It's been okay. Is pak choi. Probably should sow it again because I do like pak choi, but it's one that I've not had much success with. I had some kind of a leaf miner or something, did a kind of a job on it the last time. So I haven't sowed it recently, but maybe I should again. Next one on the list, I kind of love it. Will always have it. I think it's a crop that's underutilized. It's one that should be probably in most gardens. It's so easy to grow, can harvest over such a long period. I really like, crops like that that can give so much over such a long period with very little effort. They're the kind of things I like, and this one is chard. So the one I grow is Bright Lights. It's a beautiful multicolored chard. The beauty with that is you do one sowing per year, and that does you for you kind of almost always have some available. So I'll do a sowing, maybe 3 to 6 maximum. So just 3 to 6 plants, that's all I need. Plant them once a year into the polytunnel, and essentially I'll be able to harvest, more or less for 12 months. Now, you kind of do, if you don't get your early sowing going you say earlier in the year, then the ones that are in the tunnel will start to go to seed, before your new ones are ready. So you might get a little bit of a gap. But essentially with a handful of plants, you can keep yourself in chard for a very long period of time, in a polytunnel or even outside. So chard is another one that you can sow this month. Celery is another one. Again, celery is one that I I don't grow from seed myself. Again, a small amount really is enough for us here. So I will buy one good tray, maybe 9 or 12 plants of celery, and same thing, harvest off that and try and get maybe 12 months harvest from one tray of them. The reason I don't sow it from seed, it's not difficult. You just need to give it light. Can be a little bit trickier, needs solid temperatures and all the rest of it. But when you're only growing a small amount like that, you know, it kind of makes more sense to me to just get a little tray of it and go on again. I have celeriac sowed this year. They've germinated brilliantly, so they'll be giving you that similar flavor in the winter. And again, it's another really nice welcome harvest in the deep of the winter. And that's, yeah, as I say, that's what you should have an eye on at this stage. A lot of the herbs can be sown. So we're sowing the likes of coriander, we're sowing chervil, we're sowing dill, and beautifully this month we're sowing our parsley, our basil for the first time, and that is probably the highlight of the year when you have your basil that you've grown in your tunnel. It has that lovely, lovely smell when you walk past it. Your tomatoes are nearly ready, and you're in July, end of July. Your tomatoes are nearly ready, and that first, bruschetta or tomato and basil salad that you have, just absolutely second to none. And thinking ahead to that makes me smile and looking forward to it. So basil can be sowed this month. It's really one that needs that warm, solid temperature. So, what I mentioned at the very start around those fluctuations of temperatures. Basil will not like that. So you need to get to the point where we're warm and we're steadily warm. And then basil will absolutely fly out of it. So just navigate those next week or two and get your basil going in this month. Some other ones, mentioned parsley as well, can be sown, any of the types of parsley. Any of the other herbs that you want to grow from seed, the likes of, you can still sow rosemary, sage, thyme, all of those. Again, for any of those, I still probably recommend just getting a plant because you'll only need, for a normal household, you only need one plant of any of those. So getting a packet of seed where you have maybe 50 or 100 seeds in it probably doesn't make much sense. You just need one plant, so just go out and buy them, I would think. French beans kind of coming into the list now. Really, my first sowing of French beans will be this month. I have peas sowed already, but French beans, this is the first time. So I'm looking for that warmth, and they really do like the warmth. So you'll have to watch for them, especially over the first week or two after you've sowed them, that they germinate, and those young plants, they do not like cold at all. So this is why it's a good month to start. And as I say, I'll only be starting this month with them. Peas is another one. As I say, I have my first sowing, my main sowing. I might do a later sowing, but generally speaking, in most years, I'll do one sowing of peas, and I have a good sowing done of those now. So they're doing well, and yeah, that's kind of your peas and beans. French beans, you can have two. The ones I generally grow is I try to grow the ones in the little bushes. I find they're just for me, we don't need a huge amount. So the climbing ones are beautiful, but I just find the little small ones, the little bush plant, I can't remember the variety offhand, but they're just easier for our setup here. And won't grow a lot of them, just maybe 4 or 5 plants, and that kind of gives you a nice supply of lovely French beans over the summer months. So there's lots to be sowing. Our salads obviously continue, so continuity, our successional sowing is hugely important here, and it becomes, the frequency of sowing needs to increase slightly over the next month or two because the time from sowing to seedling being produced to full harvest shortens as the temperatures rise. And for the likes of spinach, that means that it'll run to seed a little bit quicker. So where up until now you might have been getting away with kind of 4 or 6 week spacings, you might need to actually push that back in these next couple of months to maybe every 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. And that'll give you the nice, consistent cropping of the likes of spinach. So other successional crops that will continue to sow, spring onions, they'll be a constant on the list. We're constantly sowing, we're constantly using them. They're on the sowing guides every month. And then radish can be on it every month. I dip in and out of radish, as I mentioned before. I love it for certain periods and then don't like it at other times. So I'll sow it, mightn't do it for a couple of months again, then sow it again and get little windows where it's something different. You kind of get a little bit fed up of it if it's available all the time. Lettuce will be a constant as well. Not nearly as frequent a sowing as the spinach because with the lettuce I will harvest all around the outside and I'll continue to harvest over a long period of time, allowing the plant to grow upwards, kind of smart harvesting. And by doing that, I'm tricking the plant into, it's looking to push to seed, it's looking to form its head, but I keep taking away the leaves, it keeps pushing upwards, and you just get longer out of it. So it means that you can go from needing to sow in the traditional successional sowing, you'd need to sow every kind of 3 or 4 weeks. You can kind of push that to 6 weeks, 8 weeks, maybe even longer, um, by using smart harvesting and having pushing out that requirement to continue to sow. Salad leaves and mixed salad leaves are beautiful in the summertime. You're mixing your rockets, your mustards, your lettuces, different colors, and different styles of lettuce. And that's, there you can buy them in sort of pre-mixed um, mixes that are suitable for spring and summer. Rocket and mustard, as I mentioned, can be sown individually then as well. So the salads are, a constant now as we enter these months. Also the months where we like to eat salads in the warmer weather. It's the type of food that our body craves at this stage of the year. So to have it coming constantly fresh and constantly available and nice and tender and all that is the way to do that. It's by continually sowing. And before we get on to the root vegetables, really special mention to this week's sponsor, Seeds Ireland. So Seeds Ireland are an Irish company. They have a wide range of, a lot of open pollinated seed. They have brilliant reviews on Google and Trustpilot. I know personally that I've used them probably for about the last 4 or 5 years now and always found the germination rates very good. Delivery service is very, very fast and the good range to choose from. So you can get all your vegetables, all your herbs, a lot of flowers. So you have a big range to choose from, fast delivery, really good germination rates, good value as well. And yeah, a good company to check out. They also sell a lot of sundries and things like microgreens as well. So big range and very, very good quality seed. So ideal for the week that we're talking about, the seed sowing guide for the month of May, and check out Seeds Ireland. We have a listeners offer. The link for that is in the show notes as well. So if you click through that, you get a special discount and on your next order of seeds. So the root vegetables that we can sow, we're looking at things like carrot, um, looking at probably for me, I'll do one good sowing of carrots now. I already have the sort of earlier varieties. I forget the one I sowed now, the sugar snack. I have that one sowed. I'll do a good sowing now of a winter variety in the coming weeks. Parsnip for me, I only do one sowing a year. That's plenty for me. Do a good sowing of it at that stage, and I actually still have the very, very last of the parsnips coming out of the ground now. So I'm getting a long period of time out of those before we'll start to switch into the sort of summer crops. Little turnips like the Milan purple tops and snowballs, you can still sow all those. Swedes, you can still sow. Beetroot, you can still sow. And kind of this month is kind of the first time that, the likes of cucumber, well, cucumber has been on the list before. Courgette comes on this month for me. I haven't sowed it yet, but I will sow it this month. Sweet corn, pumpkin comes onto the list for the first time this month. This is a perfect month, and especially with the lower temperatures that we've had, pumpkin is a very, very good one. And then you have melon, of course, which is on the list for me for the first time. One sowing, probably 4 or 5 plants, and that's it. And they come onto the list for the first time, and then they'll disappear again next month. So just some really special things that you can sow in the month of May. So it's quite a comprehensive list. It is probably the biggest list in terms of, in terms of the amount that we can sow within a month. As I said, you don't have to sow all these. There is ways of not having to sow these all the time. You can spread them out by using a variety of techniques. And some crops you just need small amounts of. You don't need big amounts of them. So that's kind of the herbs and the vegetables. So when we switch to the ornamental garden, and for me personally, I have a bit of sowing to do, quite a bit of sowing to do actually. So I have, some calendulas, some marigolds, things like that, well sown, well grown on. But I am sowing for the first time now in the next week, in the next days actually, cosmos. So I got three nice packets of cosmos seeds. They'll be sown in the coming days. I got a nice cornflower as well. I have some annual bedding annuals that I'm going to sow this week. Nigeria Love in the Mist, and things like that. Dahlias, I have not Bishop's Children, but one of those dahlias. So dahlias obviously can be sowed from tubers at the moment, but actually from seed, it's a brilliant, brilliant month to do that. And they'll grow so fast. So they'll germinate in probably a week. They will start to produce a nice little plug plant within 3 weeks probably. You can pot them on then at that stage, and by middle of June, you'll have a very good plant ready to go out into the ground. They'll be a little bit tender, so just watch out for things like slugs, but they'll be really fast at this time of the year. So dahlia is a great month to sow them in this month, and especially with the temperatures hopefully coming up now. Wildflowers, as we mentioned last week, can be sowed at the moment. Good few of the perennials can be sowed as well, and as I mentioned, a lot of the tubers, the likes of the begonias, the likes of the lilies, all of those can be bought in your garden centres now and potted on or sowed directly into the ground or planted directly into the ground. And it's a brilliant time to get variety. The dahlias is probably the star of that show, the perennial tubers. If you go into any garden centre now, you'll see walls of various types of dahlias, and they are beautiful and definitely worth the investment, because they'll give so much over the next few months and give such a long period of flower. You think, getting them going at this stage, you're not going to see much from them this year, but the transformation once the weather and the temperatures come up and the growth levels, it's really phenomenal how much they can do in a short period of time, and then deliver so much flower all through sort of late summer and into the autumn. So they're all worth doing. So, it's a long list. There's a lot to be at in May. Typically, it's probably the busiest month in the garden as well. A lot of your seedlings that you've previously sowed, they're needing to go out, ready to go out, and you just get tight for space. There's a lot going on. Growth rates in general are flying. Weed growth within your borders tends to be flying, so you've a lot going on, and tends to be quite a busy month. From a sowing perspective, don't forget to continue to sow. Make sure you have those crops, as I mentioned, those autumn and winter crops. You're getting those sowed now, because while you may not have space for them today, you will at some point in the very near future. And then you need to ensure that you have stuff coming down the tracks for later on. So that's that's the seed sowing list. As I say, a busy list, a lot on it, a lot to do this month, and but it's also a nice month, and hopefully nice long days, nice brighter evenings. You can work on a little bit in the evenings, so it's always nice as well. And hopefully good settled weather as well. That's what we're all looking for. Next week's episode brings us, to our open garden features for the first time this year, and it's one I'm really looking forward to. It's from Elma from the Poppy Garden, and yeah, it's a brilliant interview actually. A lot of fun, really interesting story of a garden, and yeah, it's a brilliant one for next week's episode. Huge thanks you before I sign off to this week's sponsors. It's Probio Carbon and Seeds Ireland. Links to both of those are in the show notes. And that's been this week's episode. Thanks for listening. And until the next time, happy gardening.